Hi, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into the only sports talk show that really matters right here on IUP-TV. It's The Big Hit. I'm your host, Joshua. We've got another great show lined up for you. We're going to begin by recapping the dud that was Super Bowl 48 and ask, did Peyton Manning's legacy take a hit, and is Seattle's defense the best ever? And then we have our Olympic hockey preview. Mike Gosnell and Dan Wallace will go group by group giving their predictions and tell you who will win the gold, silver, and bronze medal. And then we'll head to the rapid fire hosted by Sean McCarthy. He'll ask a plethora of questions. Our analysts will have a limited time to answer those, and then we'll send it to the college basketball segment. A lot of upsets. We'll ask, should Wichita State get the #1 seed if they remain undefeated? And how far can the Duke Blue Devils go following their loss to the Syracuse Orange? And then it's the Crimson Huddle recapping the games against Clarion, previewing the games against Seton Hill. And then, of course, my main man, Sean P. McCarthy, will close the show out with the 2-minute drill coming up right here on The Big Hit. Hi folks, welcome into The Big Hit. It's the only sports talk show that really matters right here on IUP-TV. I'm your host, Josh Hill, and we're going to start with the Super Bowl recap segment. Joining me, it's the same group as last week who previewed the game, Eric Kormos, Cody Benjamin, and Dimitri George. Guys, Super Bowl 48 from MetLife Stadium. What a dud of a game. 48-3, 43-8, I should say, the Seattle Seahawks defeated the Denver Broncos. Can you give me your best and worst moments from Super Bowl 48?
Well, it depends on what perspective you're looking at, right? But as from the fan perspective, I would say that just the way that the game started was so odd. It had a 1 in a million chance of happening with that. Literally, if you were looking at Twitter that night, Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, won $20 million. Why? He put 20 bucks on in Vegas that the first play of the Super Bowl would be a safety. 1,000,000 to 1 odds he hits. The guy's rich enough, right? He's a billionaire, and he goes off and wins $20 million just because of the first play of the game. And from another fan perspective, that game was over so fast. As soon as that safety happened, and then you could just tell right away Denver was playing from behind. It was just kind of, frankly, a boring Super Bowl because it was over so fast, and you knew that there was no way that Denver was really going to get it back into that game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it depends on the perspective, and because it was kind of a boring Super Bowl, I'm going to pick Percy Harvin's touchdown, the kickoff return, as the best play. Kind of put some excitement into the game. And as for the worst play, I do agree that the beginning of the game, obviously that's no way you want to start off the Super Bowl, but I think Malcolm Smith's interception return really, if you're looking at it from Denver's perspective, I guess, that really was the worst play that could have happened in that game.
I don't even know what the best moment. This game was over from the get-go. I thought as soon as the safety happened, I thought Peyton looked shook. The entire Broncos team looked shook because they had never, yes, it was a freakish play, the snap went over his head, but I think even still, I think Seattle was just so much physical and faster than Denver had expected. I'm not even going to say a play. I thought the halftime show was great. I thought they put on a great show for us. I thought the worst moment actually was the commercial. So I have nothing to say about the actual game. The halftime show was the best for me, and the commercials were the worst. Usually I have a couple that stick out to me. I cannot remember one of those commercials.
You know what else was tremendous was a video posted on YouTube of Seattle Seahawks fans not jaywalking to celebrate, waiting until the crosswalk light tells them to walk, and then they all go and celebrate with each other. That was probably the coolest moment, I guess, of Super Bowl 48. What a terrible game. Peyton Manning, a 24.4 total QBR in this game. Did you say that his legacy would take a hit after this loss?
It's hard to say. You don't want to say that it's going to take a hit necessarily, but when you look at his Super Bowl record, right? He's been there 3 times. He's only won 1. So you can make the argument that the anomaly is his championship. He's lost 2 times now, and he's 38 years old. You wonder where they're going to go from here, but I think it does take a little bit of a hit. 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, a fumble. kind of that repeat of past performances, and people are going to keep talking and asking, can Peyton Manning really win the next big game?
Yeah, I think that age factor kind of goes both ways because obviously at that age it's going to be hard. You know, he doesn't have that many years to get back to the Super Bowl, but he did just have his best year statistically of his career. But I think critics were already kind of looking at, you know, questioning his legacy because he does put up the numbers, but when it comes to the playoffs, can he deliver?
Right.
But also, I think, can you really blame the entire game on him? I know the interceptions, the turnovers don't help, but it looked like he didn't have much time to throw the ball. And obviously, I don't know whether it's the play calling or what, but the bubble screens that they were trying for what seemed like the entire game obviously weren't doing anything to help his cause.
I'm going to be quite honest. He was garbage in the Super Bowl. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what numbers he put up in the regular season. I don't care how many touchdown passes. He was downright awful, garbage. It was. I've never seen Peyton play like that, and I'm a big wins-losses guy when he comes to quarterback. I got a lot of guys like numbers. I'm a wins-losses, and the guys always throw to me, well, then, so you think Trent Dilfer's a great quarterback because he won a Super Bowl, or Brad Johnson with Tampa Bay, Rex Grossman even got the Bears to the Super Bowl. To me, I don't care about the numbers. Like you guys said, Peyton Manning has put up great numbers throughout his entire career. You know, how many times is it week 14 or not even week 10 or week 12, his team has got this #1 seed locked up and he has nothing to play for. He gets to the playoffs, he's 11-12 in the postseason, 1-2 in the Super Bowl, as you mentioned, Eric. And to me, he was garbage. He was awful. You know, they always talk about, well, it could be the play calling. Well, quite frankly, he is the offensive coordinator. I know Adam Gase has the title, but it's Peyton Manning's offense. The first play of the game was because he wanted to change the play, and his center couldn't hear the snap count. So I put the entire game. I said a little bit would be too much, but he deserves a lot of the blame for Denver's inability to do anything on offense because he watches as much film as anybody does in this league, and for him to be so unprepared for the speed of that defense. You know, that falls right on Peyton's shoulders.
I think just as much as you can blame Peyton, you can give credit to the Seahawks defense because I know there's no excuse for the turnovers, but I believe that both those interceptions he had, his arm was hit from a pass rusher.
The first one, he got rushed and he threw a duck.
Okay.
But the point is, what I'm trying to say is that I think this was his best chance to win a Super Bowl in his stint with Denver. I think the AFC, had a down year. They're going to have some teams that are going to make improvements. In the AFC, and I think that this was his best opportunity. They're going to lose guys in free agency like Eric Decker, who did anybody see him in the Super Bowl?
1 catch, 6 yards.
Yeah, so, this is his best chance, and he did not show up for the Broncos.
Peyton Manning.
You look at their offensive game plan. It was just short passes, 10-yard passes and under. They didn't go downfield at all in that entire football game.
Yeah, Peyton Manning certainly was bad. Bad to the tune of 10 passing yards in the first half. Bad to the tune of the second worst QBR to your man, Rex Grossman. He had a 7.1 QBR in 2006. So definitely not Peyton
Coincidentally, who won the Super Bowl that year that Rex Grossman was the
It was Peyton Manning, of course. Yeah, there we go. It all comes full circle, so to speak. But as you mentioned, Cody, you could certainly give a lot of credit to Seattle's defense. They've been nothing short of dominant this year. So I want to know, would you consider Seattle's defense to be the best of all time?
You could certainly make that argument. You look back, look at the two defenses that people talk about the most from the last 20 years. You look at the 85 Chicago Bears, and you look at the 2000 Baltimore Ravens. The 85 Bears got to the Super Bowl. The quarterback they went up against, Steve Grogan. The Ravens make it in 2000. They're playing against Kerry Collins, the New York Giants. So you look at what the Seattle Seahawks defense went up against. Best season that an NFL quarterback, as you had mentioned, had ever had in terms of yards and touchdowns. And they limited them to 8 points, shut them out in the first half. Denver had not gone the entire season, in the regular season and postseason, 2 consecutive possessions without scoring. The whole entire season. And Seattle shut them out for the entire game except for 1 possession. That stands and speaks volumes about their ability on defense. So I think you could definitely make the argument that they're the best defense of all time.
Yeah, I think the Bears and Ravens did come to mind for me as well as teams that you could argue against. In the argument of whether they're the best defense of all time, I think just the fact that they played Peyton Manning, like we said, whether it was him underpreparing or just them being that good, and I think it's more of the latter. Just from the start of that game, they set a physical tone, and it wasn't just a tone, it was something that they carried throughout the entire game, and I think it was clearly a dominant showing. So I think them moving forward, they have a chance to really solidify that title as being one of the best ever because there's a lot of upside on that team as well. So moving
a lot of
forward,
young players.
So moving forward, I think definitely a promising unit and one that should be at least working its way into the best of all time.
If you didn't watch not one Seattle game this entire season and watch the Super Bowl, and that was the only time you watched them, obviously you can be like, wow, great defense of all time. Peyton Manning shut down that high-scoring offense. To me, you look at this Seattle defense, and you want to say the 85 Bears and the 2000 Ravens. Again, wins, losses for me. They won the Super Bowl, and they're at the, they're top of the world. But to say they're the best all time, and I have a feeling I'm going to get some grief here from Eric, but I think you look at the 70s Steelers defense, the Steel Curtain, they won 4 Super Bowls. So what I'm trying to say is that Seattle could very well be the very best defense. I'm just curious to see how long they can sustain the success they have on this defense and how long they can be this dominant. If they can rattle off a Super Bowl or two, you could definitely make the argument.
The thing that's nice for Seattle, they're in a really nice position because of Russell Wilson, contractually speaking, because he was a second or third round pick.
Third round pick, yeah.
And his contract is very, very affordable for them. So that allows them to go out and spend money on defensive ends, Cliff Averill, Michael Bennett, they brought in this year. That allows them to kind of spread that money around. When you look at other teams that are paying their quarterback $15, $20 million, well, there's not a lot left to go around. So it's important to them. They're in a very good situation where they have long-term ability.
Yeah, and it's certainly impressive what Seattle's been able to do with all of the rule changes to favor the offense. It's really an offensive-minded game. You don't see defenses like this very often, so they definitely making the case to be one of the best of all time. But I want to talk about the MVP, Malcolm Smith. Not a lot of guys have heard about him, obviously, with all the big names on that Seattle defense. Do you like that choice for MVP, or do you think it should have gone to somebody else?
I like it. I mean, why not? There wasn't really any one particular person that stood out in that game that was like, oh, yeah, this has to be the MVP. You look at the Seattle defense, you can't give it to an entire unit. Yeah. So you've got to pick out one player. And you look at Malcolm Smith, arguably, he made the biggest play of the football game, the 69-yard touchdown return on the Peyton Manning interception. He also had a fumble recovery. He had 10 tackles. So I think it's a legitimate argument. There's some other people that you can throw in there, but I don't have a problem with it. He made some big plays.
Yeah, I think I can agree with the fact that the whole defense is kind of worthy of that MVP. But I would go with Cam Chancellor just because by the time that interception return happened, the game had basically already been sealed. So I think Cam Chancellor was really the guy that kind of set the tone for that defense and the amazing performance that they had. So I would give it to him. Just
for the sake of argument, I'll say Russell Wilson. And not just because he was very efficient. I think he had 206 yards, 2 touchdowns. But the ability to elude some rush that Denver, was able to get on him. He had some pretty clutch, I shouldn't say clutch, but he had some good decision making. When to take off, when to get outside the pocket, keep his eyes down the field, make some throws. You could have gave it to a guy like Russell Wilson, but again, it was hard to when they had such a great defensive performance.
Absolutely, and you can't forget about Percy Harvin, the big kick return, a couple big-time runs as well. That's all the time we have here for the Super Bowl recap, but don't worry, we're going to be talking football here on the Big Hit real soon. The NFL draft coming up, free agency coming up, of course the fantasy focus to get you all set for fantasy football. Football season truly never ends here at the Big Hit, and I know that saying is true for these guys as well. Eric Corbos, Cody Benjamin, and Dimitri George. Coming up next, Dan Wallace and Mike Gosnell take us in an in-depth preview of the 2014 Sochi Winter Hockey Games. Stay tuned. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back into the Big Hit. It's a special edition, an Olympic edition of the Penalty Box right here on the Big Hit. And joining me for that, it's our hockey insiders, gurus, whatever you want to call them. On the far left, it's Mike Gosnell. And in the middle, it's Dan Wallace. Guys, I'm going to start by explaining this Olympic format, or trying to at least. I think I want to preface this by saying it's a 3-point system. Every time you win a game, you get 3 points. An overtime win gets you 2. An overtime loss gets you 1, and a loss gets you no points. So with that in mind, there are 4 teams placed in 3 groups, Group A, B, and C. These teams will all play each other in order to determine the seeding in the knockout round. The top 3 teams, the winners of the 3 groups, will be the #1 seeds, and then the best team out of the other groups will be the 4 seed and will get the advance to the quarterfinals, so get the bye. The rest of the teams will be seeded based on their point system and then a whole bunch of other tiebreakers, which we might need to go in later if that situation presents itself. I really don't feel like doing it right now. Let's get started with Group A. Group A consists of Russia, the United States, Slovakia, and Slovenia. Obviously, the headliner of this group is the United States and the Russians, but Slovakia also has the firepower to contend. Will the U.S. be able to place well coming out of this tough group?
Well, I personally think they will. It's going to be tough because you're playing Russia. It's home court for Russia, basically. They have a lot of pressure on them, so they're going to perform well regardless. I mean, a team with Evgeny Malkin, Ilya Kovalchuk, Alexander Ovechkin, their only real question mark is goaltending, and the same can be said with the United States. They're probably leaning towards Jonathan Quick, but the U.S. has a really tough group here. Slovakia, like Josh said, they have the power to compete with this group. They don't know if Marian Gabourik's going to be back or not, but they have big 6'9" Zdeno Chara on the back end with that slap shot. The captain of the team, they also have Marian Hossa, his brother Marcel, and in goal they have Jaro Halak. So, and Slovenia bringing up, probably not going to win a whole lot of games, but players like Andrzej Kopitar, Jan Mershak, who are the only 2 players that have any semblance of an NHL career. But I think it's going to come down to U.S. and Russia, but the United States, I think, can really compete, and I would not be surprised if they take this group.
I agree and disagree with you at the same time, Mike. This is by far the toughest group. You can count the fact that, that Slovenia is in this group. They're not as strong as the other teams are. But regardless, this team has the most firepower out of any of the groups. When you have a powerhouse like Russia, and you mentioned those 3 stars that they have, Ovechkin, Kovalchuk, Malkin, those 3 are probably going to be playing on a front line together. That's scary. That's deadly to any goaltender on the other end. Will John Quick or Ryan Miller be able to handle that kind of firepower? I'm not sure. The U.S. has the pieces to contend, yeah. I don't know if they have what it takes to win. But like I said, Slovenia has one of the best players in the world in Andrzej Kopitar. But outside of him, they don't really have much talent to be able to contend with this group. And Slovakia does. They have a lot of firepower themselves. They're going to be missing a big piece without Marian Gaborik, but you mentioned they have the other pieces there, Chara, Hossa, and his Marcel, his brother too. But when it's all said and done, it's hard to argue with the fact that there's a lot of pressure right now on the Russians to win the gold medal in this, being that it's in their home country. I think it's hard to say that the Russians won't win this group.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the Olympic Games being in Sochi, anything less than gold for the Russians would certainly be considered a failure for them. So let's move on to Group B, consisting of Canada, Finland, Norway, and Austria. Canada's obviously the outright favorite to get first place in this group and the outright favorite to get the gold medal, to be quite honest. But is there anybody that can give the Canadians a run from their money for them getting the #1 seed in the knockout phase of group play?
Really looking at it, the only team I can see really even competing against Canada is Finland. A lot of pieces on that team. Tuukka Rask, the starting goaltender, presumably. But they also have some young pieces. Olli Mata from the Pittsburgh Penguins is a very good addition. Both the Jokinens, Olli and Jussi, no relation. And they have Teemu Selanne, 42 years old, going to compete in his, I believe, 12th Olympics?
Sixth Olympic Games,
excuse me. But it's still a special time for him. The Koivus, Saku, and Mikko, they're the only team really that can compete. I wouldn't be surprised if Norway gets up there, or Austria. Austria, of course, having more NHLers than Norway. Norway only having Zuccarello from the Rangers, but Austria having Thomas Vanek and Michael Grabner and Michael Raffel, but all playing in the Metropolitan Division, 2 with the Islanders, 1 with the Flyers. But Finland is really the only team that can compete with Canada, but it's Canada's division, it's Canada's group to lose, and it would be shocking if they do, but it's Finland that's really the only team.
Yeah, you and I just talked about this before we came on set here, the fact that this Canadian team, their projected front line is Sidney Crosby, the best player in the world, his line mate, Chris Kunitz, and probably the best goal scorer in the world coming off an injury, Steven Stamkos. How can you contend with that if you're anybody, if any defense, any goaltender? And you're right, though, if there is one team that can contend with that, it is Finland, because they probably have, out of all the teams in the Olympics, the deepest goaltending core. When you think about who they have Tuukka Rask, they have Kari Lehtinen, they have Antti Niemi. And they even left Pecorine off their roster because he's been out with a hip infection for so long. So they could have even gone even deeper if he would have been healthy. I don't think Finland has the offensive firepower to be able to put up the goals that Canada does to keep up with them. And they are young on the blue line, like you said, Olli Mata being really the big time headliner for that blue line. But any team with the Finnish flash, he's ageless. Don't count him out at any point. Finland will come in second in this group. But to me, it's not really going to be much of a contest. Canada should run away with it.
Yeah, this certainly seems to be Canada's group to lose. Obviously, Finland is there, but it's certainly Canada's group to lose.
It is shaping up that Steven Stamkos will compete in Sochi. He's scheduled to come back Saturday against the Detroit Red Wings.
So let's put Steven Stamkos and Sidney Crosby on a line. Good luck. The rest of the world contending against those two guys. But let's move on to Group C, the final group here in the Olympic Games. It consists of Sweden, the Czech Republic, Switzerland, and Latvia. Sweden is obviously the favorite in this group, but they do have a couple of tough tests with the Czech Republic and Switzerland. Does Sweden get first place in this group, or is there going to be another team that clinches it?
This is the only group that is so wide open that it could go. It could even go to Switzerland, because Switzerland has some nice pieces like Roman Vick, who was with the Senators a couple years ago, Jonas Hiller, Damian Brunner. But I think Sweden wins this group. Henrik Lundqvist, really their anchor in goal. They have some nice pieces, the Sedin twins, and so many more. But the talent on Sweden is undeniable. But if there is one team that could win this group, it's the Czech Republic. Tomas Plekanec's their captain. Jaromir Jagr's still there, and plenty more talent. Andrei Pavlik's presumably going to be their starting goalie. Not really the best goalie in NHL and win it with Winnipeg, but he's competed pretty well at the international level. And as far as Latvia, I mean, they don't have the talent to compete yet. Zemgus Girgensons is their only NHL representative from the Buffalo Sabres, but on the back end, Sandis Ojelins played a lengthy NHL career. Colorado, the Rangers, just to name a few. But Sweden and the Czech Republic could be interchangeable, but in the end, I think it's Sweden, just simply based off the defense that they have and the goaltending that they have.
Yeah, Mike. I mean, I got to agree with you. But the one question I have for you, in regards to the Czech Republic, is: do you really think that the Czech Republic, they're an old team at this point? They have a very old team when you think about what they have, especially with Jaromir Jagr. Yeah, he's playing well in the NHL still right now, but he's still 42 years old. Do you think that they have the ability to keep up with the youth of Sweden when you think about what they have? They have Jakob Silfverberg, who they brought in from Anaheim, and now they just added Gustav Nyquist from the Detroit Red Wings. Do you really think that they have that ability to keep up with a young team like Sweden?
Well, some of these players are playing for the Czechs, play on bigger ice surfaces, and that's what's going to be in Sochi, a bigger ice surface. And Jagr played 3 years in Russia. He knows how. And Peter Nedved, I was shocked to see that he even made the Olympic roster, 41 years old. Played for the Penguins, played for the Rangers during his career. He made the team, and he's played on a bigger ice surface. So this is where really teams from other countries like Slovenia, Latvia, Switzerland, they have the opportunity to show the NHL what they can do. Matt Zuccarello, perfect example, played in the 2010 Winter Olympics for Norway. He has an NHL contract right now. Some of these players will get contracts after this Olympics.
Yeah, and I mean, it is hard to say what's going to happen, but you can't deny the fact either that Sweden, in my opinion, has the best goaltender in the world playing in their net in Henrik Lundqvist, and that's a huge factor in itself right there. Czech Republic, to me, is easily, I don't want to say easily, but rather easily going to get second place in this group. But again, just like Canada, to me, it's Sweden's to lose.
Absolutely. And now let's move on to the semifinal round. Let's hear your semifinalist and who will win each of those semifinal games.
Well, I think it's going to be USA and Canada in one of the games. And really, anything better would be the US-Canada for gold, but I think they're 1 and 2. I think some people are not giving the U.S. enough credit. I don't think the Russians respond well to the pressure, because the pressure is not as much as it was on Canada in 2010 when they hosted the Olympics as it is in Russia. And some of these players have been in the NHL for a long time. They don't understand players like Ilya Nikitin, who's on the team, has played in Russia his whole career. So, and he knows the pressure. But the one game is the United States, Canada, and the other one I think is Russia, Sweden.
Yeah,
it's going to be interesting, but I think those are really the two games that we'll see.
And again, I mean, there's no way I can disagree with you. I think Canada ends up with the 1 seed because of the fact that they shouldn't lose any points in that group, quite frankly. They should come out of that group with all 9 points. And second, based off of their weak group, I'd have to put Sweden as number 2. And third is going to be the winner from Group A, which I believe is going to be the Russians. It's going to be hard to beat them on their essentially home ice surfaces. And I got to give the fourth one to the U.S., so my matchups then would be the same as yours. I'd have Canada against the United States in the semifinals, and I'd have Sweden against Russia.
Now, let's the whole shebang here. Who wins the gold medal, who wins the silver medal, and who wins the bronze medal at the 2014 Sochi Olympic Hockey Games?
My pick has changed. I've been going back and forth on this, but ultimately it's going to be Canada. They have too much talent. There's almost too much talent to lose, and they're probably going to win it over. I'm going to pick Sweden to go to the gold medal game. I like what Henrik Lundqvist has done to turn his season around in New York, and just a good mix of young and old on the Swedish roster. That's my pick, Canada over Sweden, with the United States, getting the bronze.
This is where we're finally going to disagree. We've been in agreement on pretty much everything so far this entire segment, but I do agree with you. Canada will win the gold. I think they beat the U.S. in the semifinals. The other semifinal matchup, I think Russia beats Sweden. And again, I have to go back to the fact that it's going to be nearly impossible to beat the Russians. They have so much to play for at this point, playing in Russia, and then which would set up a bronze medal matchup between the Swedes and the United States. My bronze medal, it's going to be a letdown for the U.S. this year. They're gonna get the 4th place, but the bronze is going to go to the Swedes. And I have to agree with you on the gold medal. I got Canada winning the gold and Russia getting the silver.
Yeah. It'll certainly be an interesting Olympic Games. The timing, not ideal for some of these games in terms of our time, 7 o'clock in the morning and stuff like that. But that's all the time we have here. Our Olympic preview, a special edition of the Penalty Box. It's getting a little warm in here, and rightfully so. Sean P. McCarthy has a rapid fire.
It's gonna get louder.
Hello, thank you for joining us. Welcome back to The Big Hit. We call this segment right here Rapid Fire. And how this works is these guys are going to have 30 seconds to answer each question. And at the end of 30 seconds, they'll hear this sound. And that means time is up. Their thought process should cease to exist. I'm Sean P. McCarthy. To my left here, we got, and I forgot his name.
Vaughn Delzell.
Vaughn Delzell. Let's start that over. Hello, and thank you for joining us back here at The Big Hit. This segment right here is called Rapid Fire, and how this works is these guys are going to have 30 seconds to answer each question. At the end of 30 seconds, you hear this sound, which means time is up. Their thought process will cease to exist. I'm Sean P. McCarthy. Here we got Vaughn Delzell, and on my right, my man, Connor Joyce. All right, guys, let's jump right into it now. With the Super Bowl now over, the Texans have the #1 overall pick in the draft. Now, my question to you is, who would you choose for the #1 overall pick if you were the Houston Texans? Vaughn, we'll start with you.
If I was the Houston Texans, I would take Johnny Manziel. The reason why is he's from Tyler, Texas, hometown boy. He went to Texas A&M. He would bring in so much revenue to the Houston Texans and bring them some new excitement to their team, and they would just benefit so much. You win your first 2 games and lose 14 in a row. You need to change up, not a drop back quarterback, which they had before.
You know, Vaughn, I totally disagree with you. Teddy Bridgewater, in my opinion, is a great pick for the Houston Texans. Teddy Bridgewater's footwork in the pocket is just outstanding. And I don't think that the Houston Texans need a mobile quarterback right now. I think they need a guy that's going to sit in the pocket. He's going to deliver the ball to some of their receivers they have down there. And they will be a very good offense with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback.
All right, very good answers to both of you. We'll see who that comes up when the draft is on. All right, now with the NBA All-Star game announced, who do you think is the biggest snubs from the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference? Vaughn, we'll start with you again.
Okay. Eastern Conference, I believe Kyle Lowry was the biggest snub of them all from the Toronto Raptors, and mainly because he put up almost 18 points, almost 8 assists, numbers way far better than Joe Johnson of the Nets. And the Western Conference is Anthony Davis. The All-Star game is in New Orleans, which I figure that he should have been in, and putting up 20 points, 10 rebounds, and 3.5 blocks. He's having a monster year, and he just got left out to a Kobe Bryant who only had eight played only 8 games. So Anthony Davis.
Anthony Davis, Connor.
I agree with you with Anthony Davis, and on the other side, I like Lance Stevenson from the Indiana Pacers. He's been the best in triple doubles this season, so I think he got really snubbed in the NBA All-Star game this year. And as you said, Anthony Davis, he's been playing great this season. He should have made the All-Star game. Some guys like Kobe Bryant, who haven't been even playing all season, made it, which is very disappointing in my opinion.
All right, guys, let's jump into NHL hockey now. The Olympic break is coming up. It's a short break, and each team will have, time to regroup. What team do you think will benefit the most from this short Olympic break?
This was a really tough question for me. I feel like a lot of teams can benefit and a lot would get hurt. So I went with the Washington Capitals, but mainly because they're only 2 spots out, about 2 points outside of Detroit and Philadelphia for that 8th spot in the conference. They have 4 or 5 injuries right now. That hurts them a lot. Their best player, Alexander Ovechkin, is going overseas to play for his home country of Russia. So I feel like it's going to be tough for them, but either they're going to stay in the same spot or they're going to catch up to the 2 teams ahead of them. And the Eastern Conference has been so good this year with the Pens excelling and other teams like that.
Sorry, we're going to have to cut you off there. There's that dreaded buzzer. Connor, 30 seconds on the clock.
I mean, I agree with you. It is really difficult for some teams to go into this Olympic break because they might be on a hot streak. For example, the Philadelphia Flyers have been playing really well these last couple games. But as this Olympic break comes, they might get worse and worse. My team to benefit the most is the Pittsburgh Penguins, actually. I think they can rest some of their guys' legs. You get Letang back, a big guy who's been sick. They're going to come back after this All-Star break, and they're just going to be on fire.
Oh, sorry. Going to have to cut you off right there. All right, so we have the Caps and we got the Penguins, 2 metropolitan rivals. All right, we'll kick things over now. We'll go to football, or soccer, as us Americans call it. Who will win the Premier League? Will it be Arsenal, Manchester City, or Chelsea?
This was also another tough question. They're all separated by only a couple points, 2 or 3 points in the division, but I went with Chelsea. Chelsea had a big game the other day against Manchester City, and they beat them 1-0, giving them a lot of momentum, a lot of time going in. So I feel whenever they play Arsenal, they're going to have that chip on their shoulder like they're the best team, even though Arsenal has the better record right now. But Chelsea, for sure, I think, is the team to beat right now.
Well, Vaughn, we talked a lot about this all day, who we think is going to be the best in this Premier League. In my opinion, my favorite team is Chelsea. I think they've had some big wins against some good teams, as you said, Manchester City this past week. I think they're my favorite team. But I think the best team and the team that's going to win the division is right there in Arsenal. I think they're easily the best team right now. They have the best record, most points, obviously. So I think they're going to keep it rolling. Their team is just very strong, and they're going to, I think, win this Premier League here at the end.
All right, very good answers. Thank you. Vaughn, Connor, you guys stay tuned. We're not done here. We're going to have Crashing the Boards next with Kyle, the Birdman Condor, and Mikey Martone. Stay tuned.
Listen, all I'm saying is LeBron James is better than Michael Jordan.
Why did everybody get so quiet?
And welcome back into the Big Hit. It is time to crash the boards, and joining us for that, got a new guy joining the Big Hit. It's the Birdman himself, Kyle Condor. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thank you,
and in the
Josh.
middle, it's Mikey Mike, Freshie himself, Michael Martone, the Swiss Army knife, joining us right here on the Big Hit. Guys, it was a big weekend in college basketball, a lot of upsets, but I'm going to ask you right now, what was the most impressive upset of the weekend?
Josh, you're right. There was a lot of upsets this weekend, but I'm going to go ahead and say the most impressive one was Texas over Kansas. And I'm not just going to say that because it was the best game single-handedly. I'm going to say that because Texas and the run that they're on is very impressive. A lot of people had Rick Barnes as somebody who was on the hot seat at the beginning of the year, and the team has not lost since January 8th. They're on a 4-game win streak versus all ranked teams. They're now ranked 15th That's the first time that they've been ranked since the end of the 2010-2011 season. So what they're doing right now is very impressive to me, and the win over Kansas just really impressed me even more.
Yeah, you're right. There were a ton of upsets this weekend. My most impressive upset was actually Indiana over Michigan, 63-52. Indiana was unranked, and Michigan, number 10, also on a 10-game win streak, so they had that going for them. But Indiana had a streak to keep alive as well. They hadn't lost to Michigan at home since 2009, so they kept that streak going, upsetting Michigan. And I was really impressed with Yogi Ferrell as well, in particular. 27 points, 7 3-pointers out of 8 attempts, and he on the defensive side he was just great as well. Held Nick Stauskas, one of the best players in the league, to 6 points, his season low, and that helped them keep Michigan as a team to their season low for points at 52. So I was extremely impressed with this game and extremely impressed with Yogi Ferrell in particular.
Yeah, ton of upsets to choose from. Nick Stauskas, arguably the Big Ten Player of the Year. I think you would both agree with that. But let's go on the other side of the spectrum. What was the most disappointing upset of the weekend?
The most disappointing upset, in my opinion, was the Arizona loss to Cal. And it's not because, Arizona lost the game, it's the way that they lost. When the game started, they lost one of their key players in Brandon Ashley. We'll get to that later, but that hurt a lot. And then the fact that they lost on a last-second shot was really heartbreaking for the team. It's not like they lost by a big margin. It's not like they played awfully. It just came down to the last second, and Cal was able to end it on a very, impressive shot.
Yeah, that was actually my most disappointing loss as well. Cal over Arizona, 60-58. So like you said, it wasn't a blowout loss by any means. They won by 2 points on the buzzer beater with 0.9 seconds left. And really the aftermath really disappointed me as well. It really didn't shake anything up. Arizona stayed exactly where they were in the rankings, still number 1. And so afterwards, people were just kind of saying that it didn't mean anything that they had this big loss. But so it was just kind of disappointing overall.
Yeah, and just the fact that Arizona was easily the best team in the nation, and that loss really hurt them. They were the best team in the nation. And now they're definitely, in the talks of being a team that was supposed to win the tournament. Now they're definitely, not in the running as much anymore.
Absolutely. There were a lot of great games, a lot of upsets. We had a couple Game of the Year candidates. That triple overtime game between Iowa State and Oklahoma State was absolutely tremendous. 16-19, triple overtime. Iowa State beating Oklahoma State 98-97. Incredible. That's probably the game of the year, but just a couple days ago, we had ourselves what we thought was the game of the year between Duke and Syracuse. Number 2 in the nation against number 17 in the nation at the time. Set a Carrier Dome record for attendance. Over 35,000 people attended that game. Duke lost in overtime 91-89. Did Duke impress you with how they played against Syracuse this weekend, and how far can they go in the tournament?
Oh, Duke definitely impressed me this weekend, and that's because, they were playing at a stage that was much brighter than anything they've seen all year. Being at the Carrier Dome in front of a record-setting crowd, and the fact that they were even able to come close to beating Syracuse in that game was very impressive. As far as their chances in the tournament, they can really go as far as the players take them, and that's easy to say, but not with a Duke program that usually relies on their coach, Mike Krzyzewski. Jabari Parker, who is what people say their best player, has almost abandoned the system that Krzyzewski normally runs, which is spread the ball, get the ball to every man on the court. And Jabari Parker has not done that. He's taken 65 more shots than anyone on the team, and he's second in field goal attempts amongst players on ranked teams. That's really not the style of play Duke usually goes with. And I think if he continues to do that and continues to be play like a freshman, then I don't think that they'll get as far as people expected them to at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I was extremely impressed with Duke. Even in the loss, they looked very, very good against a Syracuse team who's arguably the best in the nation. So this game was hyped up, and it really lived up to all of the expectations. I thought it came down to the buzzer beater, tied at 78, send it into overtime, and in overtime, Duke really could have won. They led 87-84 with about 80 seconds left, so they could have hung on to win that game. So they were in it the whole time against this incredible team. So they impressed me with that, and I think they can go relatively far in the tournament. Sweet 16, Final Four. they're just an extremely talented team, young, and like you mentioned a little bit about Jabari Parker, I really like him. One of the best players, I think, freshman that is, so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really a big-time emergence we saw was Suleiman hitting the game-winning shot to force it into overtime. Not the game-winning shot, but he forced it to overtime against a very good Syracuse team, one of only 2 undefeated teams left in the country, the new #1 in the country. The other undefeated team is the Wichita State Shockers. They are 4th in the top 25 poll and still undefeated. They do play in a very weak conference. But as of right now, do you think they deserve to be a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament?
See, this is a topic that really bugs me, Josh. And I believe that Wichita State does have a good team. Their coach, Greg Marshall, is excellent. They have NBA talent on that team in Clay Anthony Early, who averages 16.2 points per game. But the conference that they play in is extremely weak. And I think that in order to get a #1 seed, you need to beat someone worthy of bragging about. And they haven't done that yet. They haven't faced a ranked team all season and probably won't. The conference that they're in is so weak. Only 4 teams in their conference are over 500 overall. Only 5 other Division I conferences have fewer teams over 500. In order to be a #1 seed, like I said, you need to beat someone worthy of bragging about. Wichita State hasn't had the opportunity to do that and won't. I'm not saying that their talent is not there, but you need to prove yourself to be a #1 seed come March, and I don't think that they're going to be able to do that. Therefore, I don't think they deserve a #1 seed.
I'm actually going to have to disagree with you on this one. I think they do deserve a #1 seed. I think they're the 4th best team in the nation, so I think they should get one of those #1 seeds. I know they're not in the best conference. I know they haven't, you mentioned some of the stats, I know they haven't played the best teams or anything like that, but the way they've been winning is impressive. They haven't been playing down to these teams. They've been playing up to their level and what they should be playing at. They've won by 5 or less 3 times all year, so they haven't been in any close games. They've been blowing these teams out, which they should, and that's exactly what they've been doing. So the way that they're winning, to me, shows me that they are a good team and that they do deserve a #1 seed.
Now, Mikey, you said that they haven't played any close games all year, and for the most part, you're right. But on Saturday, the day that all the upsets happened, what people didn't realize amongst all the controversy was that Wichita State played a very close game versus Evansville. And to be honest with you, I'm a huge sports fan. I didn't even know what an Evansville was that day. And they played a very tough game versus Wichita State. If Wichita State plays like that against a team that they might see in the tournament, such as Creighton, then they're going to have some problems. You know, I think that if a team like Oklahoma State, who's been getting pounded by ranked teams, had a Wichita State schedule, they'd be beating all these teams by 30, 40, or 50, where Wichita State's beating these teams like by 15, by 30. And I've never even heard of some of the teams that they're playing. At one time, I thought they were playing against a community college, but it was, you know, I just don't respect their schedule.
Yeah, it's definitely a controversial issue. You see 2 people here, neither one can agree should they get a #1 seed, one of only 2 undefeated teams left in the country. The previous undefeated team was the #1 ranked Arizona Wildcats, and they lost to Cal. Really didn't get a lot of notoriety because of the time of the game and all the other upsets of the day, but the #1 team in the nation went down, and it really didn't create as much of a shockwave as you thought it might in other situations. But they also lost their starting forward, Brandon Ashley, for the remainder of the season. Can they still win a national championship without Brandon Ashley?
See, Brandon Ashley wasn't Arizona's best player. But let me tell you something. He was 3rd on the team in minutes, scoring, and rebounds per game. That right there just goes to show you that Arizona was doing so well because they had so many different key players. And this kind of reminds me of when BYU lost Brandon Davies back in 2011. They went from a team that people were talking about as a possible national champion, and once Brandon Davies got suspended, everybody just crossed him off their list. So the loss of Brandon Ashley is huge. The Arizona team is way too young to deal with an injury like that. They only have 1 senior who really doesn't produce. They have Nick Johnson, who leads the team in scoring, Aaron Gordon, who's one of the top freshmen. They're going to see a lot more pressure than they've been this year, so you'll start to see their stats decline now that Brandon Ashley is not there. In other words, I don't think this team even has a shot at winning the national championship. And before Brandon Ashley went out, they were easily the favorite. So it is definitely devastating for Arizona.
Yeah, and I agree with you on this one. I don't think Arizona can win the championship now without Ashley. Like you mentioned, he's not the best player on the team, but he was extremely consistent, third on the team in multiple of those categories that you listed, and he really just made the team work. He kept things together for the team and let them play their style of basketball. So without him, I don't think that they have any shot at the title.
Yeah, definitely a big blow to the Arizona Wildcats. We've got a little IUP connection to the Arizona Wildcats. Guard Tom McConnell, or IUP women's basketball head coach Tom McConnell's nephew, TJ McConnell, is a guard at Arizona. And that's a perfect segue because coming up next, we've got the Crimson Huddle for the Birdman himself, Kyle Condor, and Mikey Mike, my boys. We just crashed the boards, and stay tuned for the Crimson Huddle.
Today I'm going to talk about Patty. Patty's best characteristics, she's stupid. Stupid and ugly. Everything she does is ugly. Watch her eat. Watch her stuff her face. Look at her. Greasy hair, dirty fingernails. It makes me want to vomit. Get a life, Patty. Thank you.
Hey boys and girls, and welcome back to the Big Hit right here on IUP-TV. It's time for the Crimson Huddle, and joining us for that, it's of course our Crimson Hawks athletic insiders. On the far left, from the Crimson Hawks Sports Network, Anthony Shear, and in the middle, from the radio side, 90.1 WIUP-FM, it's Malusi Kitchen. Guys, the KCAC hosted a pair of basketball games last Saturday. The IUP Crimson Hawks men and women taking on the Clarion Golden Eagles. And Anthony, why don't you just recap the women's game for us real quick?
Well, the women actually won 61-57, and it was actually a great performance, Josh, because they actually lost two of their best players. Ashley Stoner and Stamp didn't play in that game because they had Stoner had a concussion, Stamp's dealing with an ankle injury, but Taylon Watson and Leslie Stapleton each had 14 points to lead IUP to that victory, and it's definitely nice to see IUP kind of continue the success. They won in overtime against UPJ on last Wednesday, and now kind of 3-game winning streak, so hopefully they can continue that success this weekend against Seton Hill.
Absolutely. Close games, but IUP has been able to win them without their best players. And I'm going to pose this question to both of you now. How do you think IUP played their first game without Ashley Stoner?
I think they played pretty well, actually. I mean, they had a problem down low with Hannah Heater early on, but she's going to get her points. She's a double-double player, so I feel like they did the best they could. They double-teamed her, even triple-teamed her at times. So I think they had to kind of play that way. I think in the future, hopefully, with the kind of having a day off Wednesday night, they can actually go and get healthy and get both Stoner and Stamp back for this weekend against Seton Hill.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I think Stoner leaving was definitely the concussion was definitely big. But yeah, they played very well, coming into that game. They played with confidence. They played with, a lot of people step up, and that's what you need, especially if two of your best players are out. You need them to step up. You need to contribute. You need to contribute more than usual. So I think definitely Leslie Stapleton, she definitely was one of the catalysts for that team.
I was really impressed with Marita Matthew, too. She kind of she had some three-pointers early on. This team is definitely living and dying by the three-pointer right now, and it's going to be interesting to see when they play Gannon next weekend in Edinburgh in that 3-game stretch they have at home to see what this team is like, because I feel like they need to win those 2 games to really make a push towards the NCAA playoffs.
Yeah, the Indiana natives, Marita Matthew and Leslie Stapleton, were very good for the Crimson Hawks. And this upcoming Saturday, they play the Seton Hill Griffins, a team that they lost to. So that's going to be very interesting to see if they can rebound from that loss, beat Seton Hill, continue their quest for the PSAC championship, because they still play a lot of teams that are ahead of them in head-to-head competition, still very much alive in that championship race. But Malusi, the men also played the Clarion Golden Eagles. Can you recap that game for us, please?
Yeah, they played great. I mean, it was definitely a game where they found their stride. Brandon Norfleet is continuing his maturity as a player. Definitely growing. His second straight 20-point game. He had 25 against Pitch Johnstown. He had 20 this game. Of course, Marcel, he had his third straight double-double, which was amazing for him. And Matisse and Devontae, they definitely stepped up. So they're just starting to come together, especially in the second half of the season where it's most critical. They're definitely starting to come together as a team and work together better. But yeah, that game was amazing.
Who I was really impressed with was Cornell Yard II. He came in and had 11 points off the bench. They need more bench progression coming off, because Jeremy Jeffers is doing great at that forward position, but
It can't just be those 5 who start. It has to be guys coming off the bench like Jesse Bostic and guys like that to really get this team going in Cornell Yard, because they're going to play teams like West Liberty in the NCAA tournament are going to run up and down the court and get those starting 5 tired. And if they don't have guys coming off the bench that can play really well and keep up with these teams, they're going to have an early exit in the playoffs.
And I think it was good that Coach Lombardi got in Kalusha Ndube Ngolo. He's definitely a big body. And
Say that again?
Kalusha Ndube Ngolo. That's his name. He's definitely a big body that can provide you with some rebounds, some points here and there, 6 or 7 points, maybe a double-double. But he's definitely a guy I think they should start utilizing more down the season because, Marcel is going to be, like you said, West Liberty, they're going to be running up and down and he's going to get tired. So you need to start utilizing him more, get him more some playing minutes.
And they're also going to be playing teams that they lost to. Gannon back here next weekend and then go on the road to Cal. I think both those games are really important for this team because they have to bounce back and beat the teams that they lost to. And I also think that playing Slippery Rock at the end of the year at Slippery Rock is a huge game because that could probably decide the PSAC West and get this team a bye. Because if this team gets a bye, you're going to look at a team hosting a Tuesday night game here against a lower seed, and that's what they need to do, hopefully going towards East Stroudsburg.
Absolutely. It was a complete team effort. A lot of guys chipping in, but Brandon Norfleet really was the MVP, and his efforts granted him the PSAC West Athlete of the Week. So how impressed have you been with Brandon Norfleet's last 2 games? Because he really did well against Pitt Johnstown also.
I loved it. I mean, you and I talked about this when we called the game. He's probably the point guard of the future for this team. He did a great job when Devontae Chance needed a break to actually kind of run the point and really get this team together. So I like where Brandon Norfleet's skills are at. I like where he's going. He turned the ball over a little bit during the beginning of the year, but I really like how he's progressed into a nice 2-guard/point guard for this team.
Yeah, I love how he's being more consistent with his play. He's definitely stepped up in some big moments to where, he's put the team on his back, and when the offense has become stagnant, he's just taken off and, scored a good 6 or 7 points in a run. So he's definitely starting to play with more confidence. He's definitely more comfortable with his shot. Because earlier in the year, he wasn't really contributing. He was kind of a little shaky. But now he's starting to come into his rhythm. And like I said, it's the second half of the season. This is when people need to start playing their best basketball.
He had a great first half against Clarion. He actually matched Clarion's whole team at one point. He had 16 points. Clarion had as a team, had 16 points. So he definitely had a great first half. He kind of fell back in the second half when they played more of their bench guys. But I think overall, you're looking at a team with Norfleet that could make a noise later in the season.
Absolutely. And Brandon Norfleet has only played 13 games total for IUP, and he started 10 of them. You could tell that they're really high on this guy. He's going to be a big part of this basketball team in the future. And the future for the IUP Crimson Hawks is this Saturday against the Seton Hill Griffins. Last time they won 56-54, almost their first loss of the season. They were undefeated at that time, so that's going to be a very telling game. You can, of course, watch and listen to that game. Watch it on the Crimson Hawk Sports Network with Anthony Shear and myself, and listen to it on 90.1 with Malusi Kitchen and Dan Wallace. Stay tuned to the Big Hit because coming up next, Sean P. McCarthy has a 2-minute drill.
We're Steelers fans. I'm a Steelers fan. And we're Steelers fans. We're good sports. I'm a good sport. I'm a good sport. We always have a designated driver. Steelers fans don't let fans drive drunk. Responsibility has its rewards. Responsibility has its rewards. Go, 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 Steelers! Go Steelers! Go Steelers! Go Steelers!
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Big Hit. This is a 2-minute drill, and I am Sean P. McCarthy. Jumping right in, first topic, Peyton Manning just lost in the Super Bowl 43-8 to the Seattle Seahawks. Congratulations to that Seahawks squad. He only had 280 yards passing, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, an abysmal performance in that Super Bowl. Best all time? I don't think so, not after that game at all. He played awful. His throws were overthrown, most of them. His completed pass that he completed about 9 screen passes in a row. The passes he did complete were screens, mostly to Demaryius Thomas. And the great thing about that Seattle defense was that they allowed no yards after catch on those screens. I don't know how many 3-and-outs the Broncos had, but Peyton Manning definitely did not step it up, and his legacy might be damaged because of it. That Seattle defense, Cam Chancellor's on it. He's a safety, big number 31. He had 10 combined tackles in that game, 6 tackles, 4 solo, 1 interception. I would have put him as the MVP. A lot of people are saying maybe Russell Wilson. I would have turned off the NFL forever if Russell Wilson would have won that MVP. Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman were actually quoted, and they said that they knew that the Denver Broncos, what their routes were, all their receivers, and they jumped them. And they also said they intercepted some hand signals going on for their audibles. Is it smart play? Definitely. Cam Chancellor, I think he should win the MVP. Moving to hockey, we got Patrick Kane. His grandfather died just before game time against the Los Angeles Kings. He ended up, didn't even miss anything. He just went right in. He nodded 2 goals and an assist. When Patrick Kane was growing up in Buffalo, New York, his grandfather was extremely close to him. They lived next door to each other, so he was really hurt. And he was even choked up in the locker room after he was talking about it. So that was something that really not easy to do, going into a hockey game, learning minutes before that his grandfather died. So 2 goals and an assist, 3-point night for him. Zdeno Chara has a huge honor. He will be missing 2 games against the Blues and Senators on Thursday and Friday. He will be the flag holder for his home country of Slovakia. Chara was ecstatic when he was asked to do it, so he'll be missing 2 games. Little known fact about Chara, in the offseason, he goes over to Slovakia where he boxes against his father. His father's a professional boxer in Slovakia, so I wouldn't want to box a guy with, he probably has like a 7-foot reach. Moving to baseball, MLB. Pitchers and catchers are reporting as early as February 6th. D-backs report the 6th, Pirates February 12th, Dodgers February 8th. Red Sox, they report February 15th. They'll hope to see if they can defend their World Series title. And the Yankees report February 14th. In the baseball news, we have Tracy McGrady, the retired NBA star. He's going to try his hand at baseball. He's going to try and sign a contract with the Sugar Land Skeeters in the Independent Atlantic League. That's down there in Sugar Land, Texas. He said he wants to be a pitcher. He's 34 years old. He spent most of his career in the NBA, mainly with the Magic and the Rockets, and at 34 years old, he's going to try and pitch. I don't care what level you're trying to play. I don't think that's going to turn out very good for good old Tracy McGrady. And the New York Yankees spent $471 million this offseason. They added Masahiro Tanaka from Japan. They signed him for 7 years, $155 million. And they also stole Jacoby Ellsbury, the center fielder out of Boston. He's making $153 million in 7 years. Also a notable sign for them is catcher Brian McCann. He's making $85 million in 5 years. That's all the time we have for today here at The Big Hit. I'm Sean P. McCarthy. For director Danielle Eberly, producers Dan Wallace and Dimitri George, I'm Sean P. McCarthy. Don't be churlish. Keep it fresh.